Okay, welcome everyone. Today we will continue on our Tao Te Ching reading, and last week we finished up to 73, and then we will continue on 74, 75, probably 76, because the last few chapter is very short. So as our regular format, we're going to read many different versions of the translation. And after that, Amang and I are going to share our translation, and then we can have a discussion based on the within the about the chapter. So let's start. Chapter 74. If anyone want to read your translation, Kwang, please, and Joe. Okay, Kwang, please.
Okay, first, do you hear the sound of my fan? Do you hear the sound of my fan? If you hear it, I would stop. Okay, I would stop. Okay. Oh no, you don't hear it. Okay, cool.
I can hear, yeah.
Okay. So, translation by Professor Robert, stanza 74. If the people fear not even death itself, how can execution frighten them? If they are in constant fear of death, and we seize and put to death committers of crimes, then who would dare? But to keep the fold in constant fear, keep the master executioner near. Let no kill instead, for that would be to wield the knife in the master's stead. And no one who would for the master's hand escape with an uninjured hand.
Thank you, Kwang. Joe, please.
Okay, you can hear me okay?
Yeah, pretty good.
Good. People do not fear death. How can they be threatened with death? If people are made to constantly fear death, then those who act unlawfully, I can capture and kill them. Who would dare? There exists a master executioner that kills. If we substitute for the master executioner to kill, it is like substituting for the great carpenter to cut. Those who substitute for the great carpenter to cut, it is rare that they do not hurt their own hands. And that was Derek Lynn's translation.
Thank you, Joe. David, please.
Yes, so Jason Legge, the people do not fear death. To what purpose is it to try to frighten them with death? If the people were always in awe of death, and I could always seize those who do wrong and put them to death, who would dare to do wrong? There is always one who presides over the infliction, death. He who would inflict death in the room of him who so presides over it may be described as hewing wood instead of a great carpenter. Seldom is it that he who undertakes the hewing instead of the great carpenter does not cut his own hands.
Thank you, David. Anyone want to read other version? Otherwise, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, Amang.
Hang on, I need to exit out of this real quick. Chapter 74, The Executioner. If people do not fear death, how can they be threatened with the punishment of death? If people are made to constantly fear death and they still act oddly, I can arrest and kill them. Who dares? The executioner is usually in charge of killing. Those who kill for the executioner are like whittlers cutting for the master carpenter. Whittlers who cut for the master carpenter rarely do not hurt their own hands.
Thank you, Amang. I do find out that this and the following, I do see gradually have some flavor talking to associated to legalism, this kind of flavor. And then this chapter, probably one of the strange or difficult chapter to understand. Okay. First, talk about who dares. Okay. So I think the first line is not that difficult to understand. If people do not feel death, then you cannot threat people to use the punishment. That's true. So if people constantly feel death, then you can use punishment. And the who dare, that means what? Means who means the people. So it's to me it's a little bit strange, but on the surface. But if you have a better idea, that would be great to share. Okay. Second thing is in Chinese called 厮杀者, okay. 厮杀者, that also have a very difficult explanation. I translate as the executioner. So with the capital. So some people said that's the heaven. Some people said, so that become a little bit flavor of religious Taoism or some karma. If you did something bad, the great executioner will do it, and then you should not do it for heaven or for God. Let's put it this way. And then if you do that for God, it's kind of like Hitler's cut for master carpenter. So that's one way on the surface to understand this chapter. But again, I just have to admit it's a little bit difficult to understand this chapter. And of course, I will expect to have a few discussion to understand. And in a way, I also like to know, how does everyone think about this chapter? And of course, I want to know Amang how to think about this chapter. Yeah. Thank you, Amang.
Thank you, Jason. This is an odd chapter, but time and place is really important here. At the time of the writing of the Dao De Jing, a princeling would very easily be able to take umbrage at any old person, tell one of their nearby guards or somebody handy, hey, get that person for me. They insulted me. They didn't bow deep enough. They didn't, genuflect the way I wanted them to, and then summarily call for their execution. And or they could just conscript them for coolie labor, put them to work forever, and let them die digging a ditch. And so with that in mind, then when you read this as advice to that individual, it says, if people are made to constantly fear death, but they still act oddly, sure. And the sure isn't there, but it's sure, I can arrest and kill them. That's kind of the implication there. But he then asks the question, who dares to do this? Why would you take it upon yourself to do this? The executioner. There is one whom has this job and is entitled to sort of dole out capital punishment. And what he's saying is, when somebody takes for themselves those things which they have not developed the authentic entitlement to be elevated to the position of executioner would actually be a very high position within a court. It is something that was considered a very honorable job. Unlike things like funeral directors, this was somebody who is entitled to take life, decreed by the emperor. You aren't that person. Even if you're important, you're not that person. And if you try and pretend or act like you're that person, you're like the whittler carving for the master carpenter. And what's the result? You're going to cut your own hands. You're going to make the mistake of being capricious with this power. And it's going to come back and bite you in the butt. That is the subtext to the text, or the connotation that is being offered here to somebody with authority and power. Take this out of time and place and apply sort of the anachronism of presentism. We've all had a micromanager, somebody who is looking over your shoulder and doing your job for you when they need to be doing their own. And they are insufferable to work for. And usually the project, the enterprise suffers for their constant meddling in affairs that they have no business any longer meddling in. Their job is something else. That would be a way of taking this ancient advice into a boardroom, into a entrepreneurial endeavor, into any sort of leadership position. Know your role. If we were to give this just cliff notes, that's what it's telling the person in charge. Know your role. Just because you have the power to fire anybody on the team doesn't mean you should be doing that because you don't like how they do their job. Are they doing it correctly? Do they do it well? And were they put in that position because they possess skills or talent or insight or judgment? You don't. Be a little self-reflective to answer that question before dropping the axe.
Yeah, thank you, Amam. I just checked. Su Ce, the 11th century scholar in China, the three Su family. Okay, Su Ce, his explanation is heaven, the executioner is a heaven. So that's probably the common understanding on this one. Heaven will do the job, you don't have to do it, and that would be another way to understand this one. Yeah. So we will open for discussion, question, comment. David, please.
Yeah, so again, thank you and Amon for this amazing translation, amazing work. And I know you're so pedantic about this that I have some very pedantic questions about this particular translation, two of them. First of all, I noticed the oddity of the way that Legge did his translation of that first sentence, where he specifically said, started as a statement and then to a question. The people do not fear death, then converted to the question, to what purpose is it to try? Whereas the second sentence, he starts with, if the people. So I'm really curious if that first sentence truly should be if, or if there is a statement and a question in the first and the second sentence is a pure question.
Great to ask this question. Okay, yes, the answer is yes. Okay, if. Okay, and because it's raw. Okay,
right,
it means if. But the question, you make a good point here. Okay, the first one doesn't have raw, doesn't have if. So I added if. Okay, good question. I start to question myself. Why do I add this if? Right, but it could be. Okay, so after you ask this question, I kind of think about it. If I take out this one, right, it just become a plain statement.
Yep.
People do not fear death, right?
Yep.
That's another way to read it. Yeah. But I have to admit, probably I should put a parenthesis here. Okay. To be
Because Legge sort of said, the people do not fear death. Then the next phrase is, how can they be threatened with? That's the question starts with how, not with the first if.
Yeah, and then the question mark has a reason because 奈何, okay, ancient Chinese doesn't have no punctuation.
Yeah.
So I have to assume when you say 奈何, okay, that means how can this
Yeah,
happen?
there's definitely a question there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that definitely is a question. But if it's not there, okay, I agree with that. Okay, so thank you for
And
mentioning.
then the second
Please.
is very pedantic, related to Amon's comment that, again, interestingly, and again, this was from an 1894 whatever translation, but Legge specifically says hewing, not whittling. Whittling implies a knife, whereas hewing implies an axe. And when we're talking about executioner, wood chopper, I'm wondering if a better word would be hewer for instead of whittler for this to express, because you're normally chopping a person's necks with an axe, not with a knife. So depending on what this word really means and how and what comparison they're trying to make, that it's again the carpenter is working on some large log, a large thing, it would be hewing or hewer, and the small at a delicate level would be whittler, whittling. So the question is, again, to be pedantic about the words, if you're trying this very excellent translation, if you're really trying to express that, is hewer a better term to be used for this Chinese word?
First, thank you very much, David. I really like you call it a pedantic question, okay? Because that's the purpose I'm doing this translation, because I want to make sure it reflects the true meaning. And then I refer your question to Amang. I think Amang will be better understand it.
I just dropped etymology into the chat. So the word in question is jiu, and it literally translates to chop or to carve wood. And I do think that whittler actually works when the metaphor is that of a master carpenter. When you're talking about carpentry, that was an art where many tools were employed, but joisting carpentry into a well constructed item meant precision and care and years of practice. There are some wonderful and lovely videos you can actually watch of traditional Japanese joisting, which actually does show you what this would look like. So if you imagine, just to sort of play out the analogy, the Japanese carver, master carver, spends hours sharpening their tools. It's a meditative practice. And then they go to their wood or their subject and one hit, done. Now you picture somebody who approaches it with like a carving knife or even the same implement and hits and and then I got to chip it out and make it work. So this image of whittling, I think, works very well as sort of a contrapposta to the idea of the master carpenter. And the word Joe actually supports that. It doesn't necessarily
But again, I mean, it's not to be a little bit argumentative. I mean, hewing is that preciseness as opposed to chopping. I agree that chopping isn't right, but I'm advocating for hewing, not for chopping. So that
right,
whittling,
but
hewing and whittling are basically a difference in size, scale, not in precision.
I would agree, but I'd also think that the image of hewing almost has implicit in it some degree of precision, whereas whittling is more idle. It has an idle connotation. That's one of the reasons why I thought this word really worked. But I am open to other critiques. If others think that as well, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, thank you. It's a difficult decision anyway. Let's put this way. Yeah, and not only we have a different way of understand ancient Chinese, even to the English, we probably have a different image when we read the same English word. So anyway, very welcome anyone to, you can call it pedantic question or challenging, disagree, critique. It's all welcome. Thank you. Kwang, please.
Well, since I'm a pedantic person myself, I just want to indicate that the Chinese character for Chuo, the right component is the symbol for an axe. But I heard what Aman said, and I heard what David said. If we go by the character, because Chuo has an X in the character, it would be who. But I understood perfectly the argumentation of Aman. So widow would be interesting too. So just for my pleasure to be pedantic, that's all. But it's not my main comment. My main comment is about the fact that there's a very deep relationship between the stanza 73, the last one we read last time, and this one. Because I would like to read the first two lines of 73. Be brave in daring, kill or be killed. Be brave in not daring, live and let live. And I would say that what 73 is a kind of general advice for everyone. 74 is the same general advice, but not for everyone. I would say that it's more for the rulers, but it can be, that's one. Two, I think that this stanza is also a kind of diamond because you have the three perspective of
I think Kwang.
Chinese Taoism, Confucianism, and legalism in the same, and it can be interpreted in the three ways. I think that the Chinese statesman, philosopher, and poet Su Che of the Song Dynasty gave what I would call the Taoist interpretation that Jason gave. Okay, that in this case for Su Che, the executioner would be heaven. Okay, would be destiny, would be God. You can call the supreme, etc. In the sense that if you behave badly, you would be punished somehow. Okay, there would be always a justice at the end of your road. That's one. That's the highest interpretation. The second one would be the Confucianist one. Okay, and I would say that Professor Roberts, in his command of this stanza, gave a very good remark. For Professor Robert, this stanza is a variation on a similar theme in Analects 12.19. Confucius replied to the following question. The question, what do you think of killing the lawless to attract the lawful? Confucius answered, when you hold political authority, why use the death penalty? Seek what is good and useful, and the people will be good and useful. The virtue of the true prince is like the wind that bends lesser men below as if they were grass. Okay, so most of the time, the phrase is like the wind that bends lesser men below as if they were grass. Most of the time, it's not very well received because it sounds very authoritarian. But we have to put this in context. If that phrase means that the shining forth of the of the virtue of the true prince, will influence psychologically and epistemologically lesser man, that the prince would not be forced to execute them, put in that context, that phrase that the virtue of the true prince is like the wind that bends lesser man below as if they were grass, has a much higher and a much more refined meaning. And of course, the last level of interpretation, the legalist one, has to be understood at the basic level. That is, well, sometimes the prince would have to ask the services of the executioner for the people who are criminals. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. I think let me share my screen for one more time. I think thank you, Kwang, for mentioning this. I almost forget. It makes sense to read with 73 with 74. Okay, so you can, if you read, if that's assume we put these two together, right? So you will see that's talking about just like Kwang said, this one probably talking about the to the regular people, okay? And the 74 start to turn the head to talk to the prince, okay? So, and they are talking about the same subject. And then we understand the executioner as a heaven. It also makes sense, okay? Because during even the Buddhism thinking or Taoism, religious Tao hasn't developed during that time, but the concept of heaven has this kind of so-called wheel of heaven, in Chinese called Tian Zhi, okay, which being focused on the Moism, okay, talking about. So heaven has its own will, okay, to do good and punish bad, okay. This concept is there, just not being focused by Confucius, but this concept is there. So it will make sense if you look at the word being used in chapter 73, it talking about Sa, the killing, okay, and talking about heaven, and then and we have a lot of discussion on what the meaning of heaven's net last week. So it will make more sense if you read two together. So I think that's the another way to understand. And you probably will see 75, okay, it's sort of also related on this one. So for the last chapter, look as the theme has been changed for to different direction. Anyway, that's just my thought. Thank you. Let's go to Ella, Paul, and Madeline. Ella, please.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, I sort of wanted to just develop Amon's initial metaphor, but I like some of the things that you added, Jason, about the eternal. So starting with the metaphor that Amon brought up, I sort of think about, you know, the middleman in the setting of, let's say, a factory with a lot of workers working very hard. But the middleman's job is to do the bidding of the owner. And the middleman is told by the owner, well, they have to work longer. They have to, you have to pay them less. The quality has to be more exacting. And there's a lot of pressure put on the workers. Now, the middleman, it seems, is being told, you know, don't do the bidding of the master. In this case, in this metaphor, the wealthy owner. Because your interrelationship, and this goes back to heaven's net, you have an interrelationship with these workers, and they have an interrelationship with you. So therefore, you know, as you're standing over them, expecting too much of them and taking their work and their dignity for the master, you are losing part of yourself in this interrelationship, because everything and everyone in the universe is interrelated. And so, in a sense, to avoid this injury to self and to others, you may want to have more autonomy from the master as much as you can in that particular position, and have reasonable expectations, because what is going to happen will happen, and don't take that on yourself to such a great extent.
Thank you, Ella. Let's go to Paul, please. Is that Paul? The next one. Yeah, Paul, please.
Yeah, the last 10 minutes or so have pretty much answered what I was going to ask. So I'll put it as a statement and see if I understand this right, or my way of taking what everyone's talking about here is maybe interpreting Quan's thing in his manner of the epistemology, meaning at the highest level, this is heaven, but it's also legitimate, as Aman said, to think of it as a court system, and you want to use the processes rather than sort of a vigilante at random approach to the ultimate punishment. And they're both valid at their epistemological level. So those were the sources of my questions, but that's how I'm coming out of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Madeline, please.
Yes, thanks, Jason. Thanks, Aman. My question is, what does it mean to behave oddly in this context? Does it mean to step out of line in terms of the Confucianist doctrines?
Let me try and tackle this one, because I do think I know what they mean. If people are constantly in fear of death and they still act oddly. So imagine a world where the Queen of Hearts is in charge, and at any time she can shout off with their head. And despite that, people still just kind of thumb their nose at the expectations of them. They're idle when they should be working. They don't cross the street for the proper noble. They just behave counter to a harmonious sort of society. That, I believe, is what he's talking about when he says when people still act oddly. And actually, oh my God, why did I lose Alice's name? Alice through the looking glass analogy still works, because you take that idea of the Queen of Hearts and her Retuin, who are scared stiff of her, and this odd figure shows up and doesn't behave like is expected of everyone else there. She becomes a disruption to the whole system, but he's saying, sure, if you get the occasional Alice in your Wonderland, you could capture him and you could kill him. But is that what you really ought to do? I think that's sort of the implication or the understanding of what to act oddly would mean.
Thank you, Aman. Just a little bit about this word. The word here used is ji, means art, literally means art. Okay, and then just like odd number and the even number. So if you consider even number is a norm and odd number is abnormal. So it just said people act oddly. Doesn't say what kind of oddly. Okay, disrespect your parent or spit on the street. It doesn't say anything on that. Just say oddly. That's the on the surface on that. And I don't see any place in Tao Te Ching tell you what kind of behavior, okay, you need to follow. Okay, I just don't see. Tell me if you correct me if you have some text talk about this. I just don't remember that anything tell you respect your parent or this kind of no. Yeah. Anyway, David, please.
Okay. So I don't really think I'm necessarily adding something new, but it just maybe you'll find whether you agree with this, that 73 to 74 is, I think that was nice to relate the two. 73 is sort of working on the presupposition that the rules of justice aren't necessarily apparent to the people. They don't necessarily perceive the fact that is disclosed in the rest of what's discussed, that justice will prevail. The natural order of things will be the natural order of things. There will be, the results. We don't need to convince you with speech or compulsion. It's not going to take, there's no haste. It's all going to come out. Recklessness will be death. Caution will be security. This is, but the people don't necessarily perceive this. Now, the second one is telling the leader, your role in society maybe is to make this apparent, to enforce and act and perform in this way. When you call for death, it should be perfectly clear. You've done the correct thing, the justice is being served, the proper course of, courts and examination and evidence, whatever is your society requires, it's apparent, and the death is the natural consequence. This will be the harmony of the people, observing the harmony of the leader, because this is the harmony with the one, right? That's how the two fit together for me. And in line with number 73 in Madeline's question, what's odd? What's odd is acting in some way that's not in line with the rules that are perfectly fixed, the rules. To act unpredictably, as there's no rule that recklessness is death, that's odd. So to get rid of that kind of behavior, you need to portray the order of things as the leader to keep the society healthy.
Thank you, David. Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. So what I was going to say already been said. So I would just add a footnote to this nice development of our understanding of the word art. My translation actually put 72, 73, 74, and later 75 together as under the title on punishment. Now, given the context, this is advice to a prince on the statecraft. So the implicit undefined norm is law and order, etc. So in that context, we can understand what art is. Therefore, my translation actually have unruly for that word. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nick. I think that makes a lot of sense to put all this one called on punishment. And so that's a perfect time for us to read 75. Okay, so this one. Madeline, you want to read or you want to have a comment?
No, I just had one more question on this.
Okay, please.
It was, there seems to be a difference then, or I'm not sure. So unruly behavior, I think that might have been the translation you had the other time you did it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so it sounds like from what Aman said, it's sort of antisocial behavior, not necessarily really violent, but people who they're just not participating. And I can see why a Taoist would make a plea for mercy for people who aren't participating.
Thank you, Madeline. The reason, yeah, I think that this a little bit pedantic answer. Okay, so this word, okay, it's opposite. If I translate as art, I mean when I translate, I mean it's opposite to even number, okay, and odd number, okay. If I translate to unruly, that means it's opposite to norm, okay, social norm and norm. So probably unruly is a good way to translate in this case, okay. But anyway, that's something I can think about. Thank you. Kwang, are you ready to read the next chapter, or you have other comment?
No, it's for reading. Okay, so translation by Professor Moss Roberts, stanza 75. The people lack for food when those above them overtax. That is why they lack. And the people can't be ruled when those above them serve themselves. That is why they can't be ruled. And when the people death defy, it is but to make their lives secure. That is why, worthier far than living royally, those who live not for themselves.
Thank you, Kwang. David, please.
The people suffer from famine because of the multitude of taxes consumed by their superiors. It is through this that they suffer famine. The people are difficult to govern because of the excessive agency of their superiors in governing them. It is through this that they are difficult to govern. The people make light of dying because of the greatness of their labors in seeking for the means of living. It is this which makes them think light of dying. Thus, it is that to leave the subject of living altogether out of view is better than to set a high value on it.
Thank you, David. Okay, so let's go to '75.
Chapter 75, Value Living. The people's starvation is caused by the excessive taxation of the ruler, so they are starving. The people's unruliness is caused by the interference of their ruler, so they are unruly. The people's disregard of death is caused by the obsession for excessive living from their ruler, so they disregard death. Only those who don't work for their own living are more virtuous than those who value their lives. Are those who care not about people's lives better than those who value their lives?
Yeah, sorry, here this part because I provide the two version. Okay, that's why we have kind of repeated because in my opinion, if without the last line, it's already very clear, and then the last line kind of at least confused me. Okay, so I do not feel the last sentence is fit to the first three lines. Okay, so you may pay attention on this one is unruliness. Okay, and the Chinese call 难治. Okay, the reason I translate this way, make another way to do it. 难治 means difficult to rule. All right, so that's why I translate to unruly. Okay, so so unruling is take the point of view of the ruler, right? Difficult to rule the people. Act oddly means the opposite way because the people's action, okay, behavior. So that's the same thing, but you can look at it in different point of view, right? One is difficult to rule, one is act. People behave oddly. Okay, so that's the reason. And then I think the first few lines is easy to understand. Starving caused by the overtax. Okay, so I think that's common around the world. Okay, even today. Okay, and people's unruliness is caused interference of their ruler. Okay, I think that's the key in Chinese called 有为, and I translate 有为 as interference, and 有为 means having action. It's opposite to 无为, no action, non-action. So the translation probably lost the Chinese flavor, but I like to point out the interference means opposite of 无为. That means being having action. Okay, and 无为 means no action. So here it's talking about people are starving because you take too much. People become unruliness, okay, because you do some action on that. So another way is give the ruler, the prince, have your hands off, okay? Don't interfere people's life. If you interfering, then people become unruliness, become unruly, right? So another way is kind of talk to Confucian ruler. You give the standard of moral standard. you kind of impose something on that, and then people become unruly. If you have your hands off, and then they'll be fine. Okay, I think that's right. And let me try to explain the last sentence. It reads as only those who don't work for their own living are more virtuous than those who value their life. Okay, so we know in Taoism teaching, a lot of time talking about value your own life or value people's life, right? And then here you talk about those who don't work for their own living, or if you insert the words, don't care not about people's life better than those who value their life. So in another way to understand, at least that would be my understanding, would be as a ruler, let's assume the audience is the ruler. If you work for people's life, okay, but you should not work for people's life, okay? It's better, not working for people's life is better than value their life, okay? So in other way, you value someone's life is not as good as you don't care. So another message is, have still the same message. Have you sent, have your hand off, okay? Even you have the good intention to kill them or to care for them, okay? It's not good enough. The best way is leave them alone, okay? So that's what I read. And I know probably not everybody will understand this way, but that's the way I understand this chapter. So Amang, I think you put, I think we have some different interpretation on this slide.
Just, I think the slightest bit. Thank you, Jason. And I try to stay off the conversation about odd versus unruly into the chat in case anyone's curious about the etymology that, or the choice, the language choice there. But I want to go to this final line. They are those. So there's two ways to really sort of interpret this. The offering I have, those who don't only work for their own living are better than those who overvalue their lives. I think that's a little more sort of the established translation for this, but Jason's translation of are those who care not about people's lives better than those who value their lives. I can see the merit for both of these, and I'm always appreciative when Jason retains one of my offerings as sort of a questioning alternative. But broad strokes, what is the thrust of this chapter? Overdo it, people suffer. Try and put your thumb on the scales, and you'll find that the scales flip in your disfavor. And so, even though being Yahweh is often considered, Jason translates it as interfering, and I kind of appreciate that because Yahweh is the opposite of Wu Wei. And it's a common refrain in modern Mandarin to say that we would say it in English as something like, he's got his, act together. He's going places. He has it, what it is. Yahweh has action is the opposite of Wu Wei, without action. And the entirety of the Tao Te Ching espouses the value of Wu Wei, far superior to Yahweh. Even though it is still, to this day, the conventional preference to say, oh yeah, that's a guy who's got it together. They're going places. So Are we supposed to not value living? I don't think so. I think what it's saying is if you care about your own well-being and your own longevity to the exclusion of others, you are nowhere near as good as the person for whom that is sublimated for care for others. I heard this put very well recently. Typically, the kindest person in the room is the smartest person in the room because they've learned to suppress their sort of monkey brain of fear of others. This is an example of if you then can go that next step of putting those others before yourself, if you're not working for your own self-aggrandizing, but doing it for those around you, those outside of you for whom it benefits, you probably have developed your the much more than the person who is just trying to get their own, which is what somebody with your way is trying to do.
Thank you, Amam. I just give some advice to people who attend this one and try to learn Chinese. Just have to remind everyone, your way is a good word, okay? Only in this Dao De Jing, it become a bad word. But when all the Chinese parents or Chinese speaking parents want their kids be your way, okay, not Wu Wei, okay? So please remember this. Wu Wei is good, your way is bad. Only in this meetup. When you go outside to talk other parents, kids, don't tell your neighbor, Chinese neighbor, say, hey, your kids is Wu Wei, okay? You should say your kids is your way, okay? That means good, okay? So I think so that's, hope people don't get the wrong message from this one, okay? Thank you, okay? So we have David and the Kwang, please.
Yeah, using your translation of working for leaves us really having to work to understand what you've translated and what it means. And I wonder if it doesn't possibly, if you read it over, mean something more transparent, relatively simple. The translation I have, it uses occupy oneself with as opposed to work for. In fact, I'll read you that last line. He who does not occupy himself with the preservation of his own body is superior to those who regard it as a matter of the utmost importance. And I noted in the notes, this is like a Maslow theory of what is your concern at the moment. If you're struggling to survive, you're not working for social coherence and the good of others and awareness of how people feel. You know, so the prior three lines were building up these levels, these destructive aspects of what can be going on. Too many taxes, too little money left. Too many rules, you can't follow the rules, you're unruly. Too lavish a ruler, you can't love your life. Layer after layer stripped away. If you're occupied with survival, you can't be more virtuous. The more virtuous people are those who aren't working constantly just for their basic needs. And that's what that last line conveyed to me, which is a very transparent message.
Thank you, David. I just want to put this one. I intentionally put work for, okay, their own life, okay, because I want to honor to the text because
But his occupation also means work for. He was
I understand, but I just usually my way to translate, I try to do my best, become word to word, okay, without losing the meaning. So I because 无以生为, okay, so this word 为, you of course you can do action, but in another way, if you use as also means for, okay, so that's and that's up to you to decide how are you going to interpret. That's I like to point out. I do work for purpose for it. Yeah. Thank you, David, Huang, and Mark. Yeah.
Okay. So here, the stanza can be a little bit paradoxical. And
Yeah.
what I mean by paradoxical
Yeah.
is that
Quan, I hate to ask a favor, can you move forward towards your microphone? Because some of the words are not as clear.
okay,
Sorry.
do you
Yeah,
hear
that'd be
me
much
better? Do you hear me better like that? Yes, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I said that this stanza is quite paradoxical because what might seems to be Confucianist, Taoist, is Confucianist. Is I read the last paragraph, okay? And when the people death defy, it is but to make their lives secure. That is why, worthier than far than living royally, those who live not for themselves. That kind of advice is deeply Confucianist. And that is the springboard that we use to go back to Wu Wei and Yao Wei. Because Wei fundamentally means having the intentions for, okay? So when you say to parents that their kids are Yao Wei, meaning that they have a direction in their life, okay? They have the right intention and the right direction in their lives. And Jason is right. All Chinese parents want their kids to have right intention and right direction in life, for sure. And Wu Wei means that you don't have right direction in life if you take it at the low level, okay? But of course, within the Taoist paradigm, Wu Wei means that you act without having your intention focus on your ego, okay? Meaning that you are acting out of compassion, out of infinite awareness. So that's within that the Taoist paradigm. Of course, that Wu Wei is much, much superior to Yao Wei. And why the last paragraph of this stanza can be interpreted in a Taoist or in Confucianist meaning is that within the Confucianist meaning, it would be a kind of sanctimonious lesson that you would have to sacrifice yourself for your family or for your work or for your neighbors or for your nation. The Taoist invitation is not that you would have to sacrifice yourself for your family, for your neighbors, for your nations, or for your work, but rather that the fact that you will not impose yourself on others is not a result of morality lessons, but rather because your awareness is such that you will spontaneously be nice and not impose yourself on others. And if you are a ruler, you would not overtax them and etc. Right? So once again, Wu Wei has to be understood within the epistemological development. And if I go back to my beloved hexagram, the highest line of the hexagram, meaning the sixth line, correspond to Wu Wei, okay, to the enlightened person, to the philosopher king, to the realized one. Okay, only at that level of epistemological development, when you have completely your full active awareness, that you will be no longer motivated by your personal reasons for actions. That is Wu Wei. Of course, Wu Wei in the lower meaning means that you have no direction in life. That is why, once again, if you talk about the kids of a Chinese person, always say that they have a direction in life, meaning Yao Wei. I stop here.
Yeah, another way to do it, I don't know how many of you are parents. So that's what I learned is if you want your kids to become your way, and as a parent, it's a better wu way. Okay, so in other way, don't be the helicopter parents. That's what I learned. Anyway, Mark, welcome here. You find us.
Hey, thanks, Jason. Can you put the text back up?
Yes.
Let me see. Okay, great. Thank you. So on line 4 there, only those who don't work for their own living are more
Yeah.
virtuous than those who value their lives. So when I look at the Chinese text, I don't see the character day in there. So I assume the virtue is a different virtue, and I'm wondering how that's different from day.
Okay,
Yeah.
xian. Okay, xian. That's the word. I translate as virtuous or better. Okay, so I think a mom provide better. I think xian could use as a better, and that's a before I translate as a worthy. Okay, so it's a difficult word. Okay, I'm glad that you mentioned this one. Yes, it's the Chinese word xian. Okay, it's here. So I think
Yeah.
he probably doesn't mean worthier, probably means better or more virtuous. Okay, but original word is 贤. Okay, constantly we translate as.
Oh yeah, and then in line number 5, you do translate it as better. I see that. Okay.
Okay, thank you for mentioning this.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Among you want to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm trying to get the etymology into the chat as quickly as I can, but xian, it actually does mean worthy or virtuous person. Its etymology is a combination of bei, which means shell or treasure or something valuable.
Yeah,
and
whenever
yeah, wise.
Mhm. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Well, that's it.
Yeah, so you am I right? They have the bei means share, right? Share, right? So usually have that word means money. Okay, so worthier is the proper translation by use here could means better or more virtuous. Yeah, it's an open question. So, Madeline, please.
Yeah, the discussion about self-sacrifice and the level of self-sacrifice is reminding me of the history of Chinese philosophy. The Mozi, who would sacrifice his entire body, and then the other fellow who would not pluck one single hair from his shank.
Yeah, thank you to mention this. Yeah, that's the left and the right. So, Kwang, please.
I just want to come back very briefly on the etymology of xian, okay, because xian has 3 elements. Ammon is right. The inferior part is for pay, meaning for money, but the superior part is in 2 pieces. Okay, the left side is for chan. Chan means ministers, okay, or vassals, and on the right side you have the symbol for a hand. Okay, the hand most of the time is symbolized having the power over something or over someone. Okay, so the xian, a worthy, has the connotation of someone worthy that to whom you would give the power over the management of money or of the people of a place. So once again, we go back to the epistemological development, okay? Because I want to put it in perspective. Within the hexagram, xian correspond to the 4th layers of the mind. And just above xian is the junzi, and just above junzi is the shengran, okay, the realized one. Okay, so xian is the lowest of the people who are capable to rule. And above the xian, you have the gentleman, the junzi, who is more capable of creativity. And above the junzi, you have the shengran, the realized one, the enlightened person, who would be precisely Wu Wei, that he would act out of compassion and not because he's motivated by his own selfish desires. I stop here because even the Junzi has a selfish desire, but those selfish desires are of a superior kind, if you want, okay? In the sense that he would like to make the nation more powerful. He would like to help people to advance in their education. He would like to improve the laws so people would not be overtaxed. So those are superior desires, but they are still desires. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwam. Any other comment? Then we'll move to next one. 76. Anybody want to read your translation on chapter 76? Okay, Kwam, please.
Okay, so translation by Professor Mose Roberts, stanza 76. Man alive is tender, gentle, hard and fast in death. Living plants are tender, fragile, dry and frail in death. For fast and hard are marks of dying, and gentle, tender marks of life. Strength in arms bring destruction, and the strong branch will be broken. Let strength and might be put below, and tender, gentle, in control.
Thank you, Kwam. Joe, please.
Okay. While alive, the body is soft and pliant. When dead, it is hard and rigid. All living things, grass and trees, while alive, are soft and supple. When dead, become dry and brittle. Thus, that which is hard and stiff is the follower of death. That which is soft and yielding is the follower of life. Therefore, an inflexible army will not win. A strong tree will be cut down. The big and forceful occupy a lowly position, while the soft and pliant occupy a higher place. And that was Derek Lind.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Joe. David, please.
Man at his birth is supple and weak, at his death firm and strong. So it is with all things. Trees and plants in their early growth are soft and brittle, at their death dry and withered. Thus it is that firmness and strength are the concomitants of death, softness and weakness the concomitants of life. Hence, he who relies on the strength of his force does not conquer, and a tree which is strong will fill the outstretched arms and thereby invite the feller. Therefore, the place of what is firm and strong is below, and that of what is soft and weak is above.
Thank you, David. So let's go to high school. Okay, so
Chapter 76, Soft and Tender. When people are alive, their bodies are soft and tender. When they are dead, their bodies become hard and strong. When all things, grass and wood, are alive, they are soft and delicate. When they are dead, they become withered and dry. Therefore, that which is hard and strong follows death. That which is soft and tender follows life. For the same reason, the strong army cannot win. The strong wood can be broken off. The large and strong belong to the low position, the soft and tender to the high one.
okay, thank you, Amam. And I think this one, I will see the logic is very typical Taoism teaching, right? They usually start with observe the nature phenomena, and then we'll see the human body. When people are alive, they are tender, soft, right? When they die, become stiff. Let's put it this way. And the same as everything, right? The grass, when they are alive, you can move around. They are soft and delicate. And when the dry wood or dead grass, it's wither and dry. Therefore, okay, hard and stiff, okay, that follows death. So it kind of like, well, you will argue A cause B, B doesn't cause A, but in modern logic. But the way Laozi, the author, try to convince people is, you see, the living people is this way, living grass is this way, the dead people is this way, and then dead grass is this way. So that's the reason. If it's hot and strong, it's kind of like a death. So tender and soft, that's alive. So which way you want to be? Be tender and soft, so you are alive. So tender and soft should be on the upper position, on the high position. Then large and strong will be on the low position. So I think that's the general argument on that, and which also match with so-called wu wei you wei. Okay, interfere, not interfere. In the high position should be soft, tender, non-doing, or wu wei. And then in the lower position is interfering, strong, hard, all this kind of thing. So kind of paradoxical, or you want to call it the reverse of what we are thinking. So again, and one thing I put is, I have been spend a lot of time thinking this is the word 强 here. This word has been, I checked the word in the entire Tao Te Ching, it appeared 21 times. Okay, so 强, this word has been appeared many times. And again, as my principle, I try to translate the same Chinese word in same English word, do my best. I find out this word would be seemingly easy to translate, because 强, if we ask anybody who knows Chinese and English, they will say, oh, that means strong. But I think 强, at least this word has two meanings, okay? Strong, let's say it's a positive meaning, and also have a negative meaning, means unyielding. That means you are not flexible, inflexible. So because the Chinese word has the passive and the active are the same word. So this word, if you take away, you can say I'm strong, I'm powerful. But in another way, you also means you are inflexible, you are forceful, you are being forced to do something, this kind of meaning. So that's the author here, kind of the play around this word. That's why we try to translate. It's difficult to keep consistent with strong or unyielding, okay? Or another way to call inflexible, okay? So that's the same word, okay? And then with double meaning on that. And that's why in English it may not sound convincing, but in Chinese it will sound more convincing, because the word 强 has double meaning here. So I just have to point out this one, and then Amang.
Thank you, Jason. And yes, 强 and jiang, they are written the same, and they have slightly different connotations, but one can skew into the other. And that's why it's a very intentional word choice on the part of Laozi for this chapter. I wanted to point out that chapter 76 is a reiteration of a lesson already offered way back in chapter 55, excuse me, that those who possess profound De are like newborn babies. So the image of this newborn baby really enamors Laozi. This is life happening in a very robust kind of way when you look at an infant. But what is an infant like? They are not necessarily strong or inflexible. An infant is incredibly flexible. Unyielding, yes. When they're hungry, they're hungry. There's nothing that can be done to talk them out of that necessarily. But in terms of sort of their soma or their physicality, they are like sprouts coming out of the ground. They're like, young saplings sprouting from the earth, incredibly pliant, incredibly yielding to the forces and the world around them in any number of ways. And what Jason was saying about the sort of flawed logic of A begets B, in the same way, we could say, we could read this, and I'll play devil's advocate here, that infants are just bounding with fat. That's the energy source that they're going to be using to create their body. That's why we look at infants and we see, fat cheeks, fat everywhere, because that's their energy source. But if we read this to say, people who are alive, their bodies are fat. Those who are dead are withered and skinny. Therefore, fat is the way to life. That's faulty logic. We know that just in terms of years of medical science and what it tells us about, the two approaches. But despite it being medically flawed, the notion here of life is accommodating. It is embracing of the world in which it exists. And it doesn't try and stand firm against the slings and arrows of misfortune, to quote Hamlet. It yields, it gives, it accepts them as wholly part of the Tao. And that is the best way for a person to approach their life, to take the slings and arrows of misfortune and say, okay, this too now, but not indefinitely. Nothing is forever. We only get into that sort of concrete, always and forever mindset. That happens in adolescence. It's something that occurs to us. And even younger than that, you can watch a young child adapt to something new like that. They're in a new place, there's new people, there's some hesitation, but it becomes normal for them much faster than it does for us as we become calcified adults who expect it to only be this way. And we take that recalcitrance as maturity, as a sign of being strong, being steadfast, being certain, where really it's courting, the disaster of the future, not being able to flex when the future arrives and it doesn't look like how you expected it to be. I really appreciate this chapter. I think it is a fundamental Taoism 101, how to be good at practicing following the Tao.
Thank you, Amam. Okay, let's have some discussion on this chapter. Please raise your hand if you anything to say about this. Oh, no comment? Too easy, I think. So
We can get through another
Just one
chapter.
short comment.
so probably we should go to another chapter. Okay.
Yeah.
Kwang,
Yeah.
after you. Okay.
Yeah, just very short comment. Here it's obvious that we have a biological metaphor, okay, with plants and life and so on.
Hey, can you move your mic? Can you move your mic?
Oh, again.
Yeah.
Okay. Probably it's because my fan most of the times. Okay, so I say that Taoism is is using a lot of biological metaphor. Okay, we have plants, we have life, and so on.
AB
And
and owl and tiger. So
exactly, it's nature. And Confucianism is most of the time using a lot of metaphor in coming from the social organization or the family structures. Okay, so I would say that the fundamental language of those two perspectives uh, is uh, uh, is rooted in their origin in terms of how their thoughts are made or are created. That's all.
yeah, that's an interesting point and also important. And another way to look at is Confucians are scholars. They live in the city, so they see everything. And the Taoism, like say, they are recluse. Okay, they live in the countryside. They see cow, they see grassy, they see mountain, they see moon. So that's how the metaphor they coming from. So yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. So we will move to next chapter. Okay. Kwang, you want to say something, please?
No, it's for reading the text.
Okay, great. That's the move on the chapter 4. So among doesn't matter we have you or not with you, we all can go to 4 chapters.
I'm good with it. Hey, it's not my loud mouth that's keeping us down.
Yeah. Okay, so Professor Most Roberts' translation, stanza 77. Heaven's way lie unto a bow full drawn, low end raised, top bent down, subtracts from the house mores and supplies those in want. Heaven's way to supply who wants by taking from the have mores is not the way of man who take from those in need to serve those who have more, who will use the surplus to serve this world below. None but men of the way, wise rulers for this reason, act without self-satisfaction, for their deeds shun recognition to conceal their contribution.
Thank you, Kwang. David, please.
May not the way, or Tao, of heaven be compared to the method of bending a bow? The part of the bow which was high is brought low, and what was low is raised up. So heaven diminishes where there is superabundance and supplements where there is deficiency. It is the way of heaven to diminish superabundance and to supplement deficiency. It is not so with the way of man. He takes away from those who have not enough to add to his own superabundance. Who can take his own superabundance and therewith serve all under heaven? Only he who is in possession of the Tao. Therefore, the ruling sage acts without claiming the results as his. He achieves his merit and does not rest arrogantly in it. He does not wish to display his superiority.
Thank you, David. Let's share.
I do want to say for the record, I really enjoy listening to the Leggy translation. It's a classic. Chapter 77, the Tao of Heaven. The Tao of Heaven is like a bow. Lower that which is high, raising that which is low, decreasing what is excessive, filling what is deficient. The Tao of Heaven decreases the excesses and fills the deficiencies. The Tao of people is not the same. It decreases the deficiencies and supplies to the excesses. Who can have the excess to give to the world? Only those who have the Tao. Therefore, the sage acts without leading, achieves without taking credit, and doesn't want to be seen as virtuous.
Thank you, Amam. The last word, just back to, I think, David's question. Xian again. Okay, so it talk about, again, translate as virtuous or worthiness. Okay, so that's the same word, xian. Okay, again, the logic here, similar to the previous one, right? He tried to compare the drawing a bow. Okay, so when you shooting an arrow, you will lower it. If too high, if too low, you will raise high. So the author used this method, this behavior as teaching, right? So then you talk about the Tao of Heaven. It's the same as you are drawing a bow, right? You will lower if it's too high, so I think. And then that's a kind of change from the common situation become a prescription, a lesson, and then you describe, and then go back to description, talking about the Tao of Heaven. That's the right way to do. But look at the people, the Tao of people. It's not the same way. They just do the different way. They decrease the deficiency and supply the excess, right? Just like if you today, you will say in the capitalist world, the rich become more rich and the poor become poorer, right? So that's kind of the situation. Okay, money all gather together, like if you want to draw the lesson. So that's the why. So go back again, talk about 圣人, the sage. I think we have a further detailed discussion of the sage last week. So something I like to point out is this word 圣人为而不恃. Okay, I translate as the sage act without leading. Okay, this phrase appear 4 times. I checked the text, chapter 2, chapter 10, chapter 51, chapter 77. Okay, so in a way, it's appear 4 times in 4 different chapters. I will try to make it consistent. And I think I translate probably different than most of the translation. I translate as the sage act without leading, because the reason is this. This word 是 means leaning on. Okay, you lean on that, rely on something. But another way to look at is in Chinese word, the same word can be active or passive, right? Kick, dog kick. You don't know it's you kick a dog or the dog is kicked. Okay, I kill you or you are killed. Well, kill you means killing somebody, also the same word of being killed. So in this strange situation, I believe it means the sage are not being relied on, being leaned on. So in a way, it's not leading. Okay, so without all you want to say leading from behind, this kind of concept. So that's the translation I make here, and I know it probably different than most of a translation, but that's the way I decide. Okay. Another thing could be minor is talking about the metaphor of bow. Okay, because the previous chapter we talked about qiang. Okay, this word, and I think it's sort of related. If you took the etymology of the word qiang, I translate as unyielding or strong. That's a size of a bow. Okay, that's the word kind of related bow. Okay, so I believe it probably had the same metaphor here about the bow of the strong, this kind of concept here. So I stop here, and then Amang, please.
Thank you, Jason. I want to use this opportunity to tout the decision to retain certain traditional Chinese words. And although it vexed some people early on, here we start to see the choice to translate xian as virtuous as opposed to retain the word de, which is often, and even I have said, well translated as virtue, but in a more archaic sense. Here, there's a nuance or a distinction between those two. And seeing the word, for those who have read many versions of the Tao Te Ching, to encounter the word virtuous when you have read again and again the word de within the text, it drives home the point. De is not merely this English word. It is something other than what English speakers would probably understand at first blush as virtue. So that's one thing I just wanted to point out. Reading Shen as virtue again or virtuous, I think really validates the idea of retaining de as something wholly other. The other thing I wanted to point out was the phrase that Jason was speaking of, that it comes up 4 times in the Tao Te Ching, wei or fu shi. This is really hard to translate because it says something in very pedantic English as not or without and not rely. That's word for word if you actually want to get really pedantic, and that doesn't mean anything in English. So I do think the choice of the sage acts without leading, this is a good way of understanding what this phrase is driving at, that to do without obvious effort, without obvious force, is really, it's another way of imparting the idea of wei hu wei, action without there being obvious action. And again, we're given a metaphor, but this time an inorganic one. This is an engineered metaphor. Bows are something constructed by a human being. It's not something that occurs in nature. But in this construction, there is only one way in which it works. A bow, which was paramount to the military of ancient China, that, you know, this is like the M16 in the military today. Standard issue, what was giving you a strategic or tactical advantage, and it only works in one fashion. When you draw, what is above comes below. What's below is risen. This is the basic physics that can't be altered of how a bow operates. And it takes this metaphor and says, what you see in your engineered or manufactured weapons of war is the Tao of Heaven in action. It only operates in this way, that you loose a quill or an arrow at an enemy. Those are all the Tao of people. That's how you choose to be. But watch this action of physics in motion. Appreciate it for what's happening and what it's actually instructing you in, which is you don't have to loose that arrow at someone who's undeserving. You don't have to deplenish the ranks of an already defeated army. You don't have to take from what is already deficient and give to your coffers, which are already in excess. You can take this lesson for what it's worth and give to what is deficient. You can take from your own excesses to do that. If you are truly a virtuous person, this is the way in which you'll approach people.
Thank you, Amam. One thing I'd like to mention here is 3 words. Okay, I think we will translate it. Probably I will make it consistent in the entire Dao De Jing. xian, this word, okay, we will translate as virtuous, okay, and probably will put a parenthesis as worthiness, okay, this way. Another word, de, most of translation translate as virtual or virtuous, and we will translate as de, just keep the original word, de, okay, because I think that's a different meaning on that. And whenever you see good, that means sun, okay, when the Tao Te Ching use sun, I will translate as good, that means non-moral, general good. Okay, so that's the way I do it. So you can always refer back to the original Chinese. So we will have some discussion if you would like. Okay, so question, comment on this chapter?
Jason,
Yeah,
do you want me to handle the moderating?
let me do it, and then so okay, so since we don't have much comment, so we already achieve 4 chapter today. Wow. And then I think we will take 2 section to finish to 81. Okay.
Okay.
Because I don't for the last we will do. So that's the plan we try to do. Okay. Next 2 weeks, and then Xun Kang invite Peggy back, and Peggy did the translation on the Zhuangzi. That's a mission impossible. Okay, it's let's put this way. It's I know, you know, Among and I want to translate on this one, but I think we will take a lot of time. So look like Peggy put a lot of effort to do that. Oh, anyway, that's a big job. Okay, so congratulations, and then we will, and I will try to attend this 2 section, and I'm not sure how long will take and how going to present, but the way we will do is let's do 2 section for Peggy, and then we will go back the 2
We'll
section.
come back. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Just do. This is like an experiment for
just experiment
2 sessions. Yeah. And
okay.
if let's see.
Just 1 minute. Then we will come back to finish.
Come back to finish Dao.
81, not all Dao, and
I know. Yeah.
We will go to because that's the mission. Okay, so we are not here to draw eyeball or whatever, but there's a 5 chapter. That's the mission. We have to finish another 5 book, and then we learn a lot from doing this Dao De Jing, and I believe the way of presenting analytic will improve a lot. Okay, and then I will encourage everyone, okay, to continue join to Confucius analytic. I think that's very important. Okay, if you like it or dislike it or find it too boring, very fun and very enlightened, that doesn't matter. Important thing is you have been in the Tao, and then you need to look at on the other side of the point. Then I think that's very important, and also very important for Amang and me, because that's the foundation of everything. Let's put it this way. Okay.
No, absolutely. I fully second that. I recommend, it's like can't really understand China without Taoism and Confucianism.
Yeah, and when we finish the Confucius, the last 5 chapter, total has 20 books, and then there's 5 left. We need to finish that. Then we will go back from the Dao De Jing from chapter 1. Okay, and the most important text, probably among the Chinese classic texts, right? That's everybody know. Okay, the chapter 1 and go all the way to 30, 36, 38. Okay. So anyway, that's the plan, and probably that take for another healthier year. Okay, so
let me do one thing. Jason and Amon, let me take this opportunity, whatever little time we have, to ask you about Zhuangzi, because I think so. What do you think? Let's start with Jason and then Amon, or if Amon you want to go first, you're welcome to do that.
No, Jason.
I know you are. Well, I think both you and me are big fan of Zhuangzi.
Oh, I'm a big fan of Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi is a genius philosopher who is able to present his material in nearly Monty Python-esque sort of comedic aplomb. The Zhuangzi is an extension of the teachings of the Dao De Jing and the Taoist who followed from him. He almost takes the conceits of Taoism to their logical extremes and really sticks a thumb in the sort of establishment's understanding of what makes for good thinking. The consummate Zhuangzi story is about a giant tortoise that was worshipped and kept in a box. It was a cadaver. And when people came to offer him a job, he said, "There's this giant tortoise. People worship it. Do you think that tortoise would be happier being worshipped or just dragging its tail in the mud and being left alone?" They had to concede, yeah, it's obviously going to be happier if it was alive. And he said, yeah, so leave me to drag my tail in the mud. In other words, don't drag me into your reindeer games. Let me be my natural self, is the absolute thrust of all of the tales of Zhuangzi. I can't encourage people to read any Chinese philosopher more. You all are familiar with probably, am I a man dreaming I'm a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming I'm a man? That's Zhuangzi's assault on Descartes', I think, therefore I am, saying, no, maybe your evidence is flawed.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Amon. Jason, what do you think?
Okay, well, I don't want to take too long because I probably can talk 2 hours on Zhuangzi. And then last year, if you are in my Saturday group, and I cover 7 chapters for the inner chapter. Okay, and then I think that's a very important text. Okay, so I just want to talk about Zhuangzi has many ways to read it. What I know I'm from Taiwan, the National Taiwan University. In the school, they teaching Zhuangzi. They have the 3 kind of department, 3 kind of professor they are teaching. Of course, one is a philosophy group. They teach this way. Another one is read as a literature because the language is beautiful. Some people read as the personal cultivation or Chinese medicine way to read it. Okay, that's another way to read. And some are not in school, mostly in outside. It's a religious reading. Okay, so still a lot in the temple, in the lot they read it as religious. Okay, so I'm not going to bias on which one I do. Of course, the personal interest is in the philosophy, so I usually read in the philosophy level. And one way I would like to compare is Nietzsche. Okay, I always see that's a Chinese Nietzschean writing. Okay, so something paradoxical, a lot of story, especially you read Zarathustra. Okay, so basically a lot of story, a lot of fable, and the story is not true, but it makes sense. Let's put it this way. And a lot of fun about Confucius. Okay, so I would say that's a wonderful text, and then there's many ways to read it, and then we will see, and then I hope, I think Aman and I also discussed about translate Zhuangzi on this one. Okay, total have a 33 chapter. 1 to 7 consider the most important because people consider that's Zhuangzi's writing. And I think myself, I made a good, I don't want to sound bragging, but I think I made a good thing on this. I organized this 7 chapter, and on each chapter, I organize on the structure, paragraph by paragraph, and put it all in the structural way to understand. So I hope I have a chance to share on this part one day. So, but anyway, I'm glad that we
Wonderful.
move in this direction.
How did the meetups that you did on Zhuangzi go?
No, basically I'm not doing because on Saturday the Asian philosophy I basically follow Feng Youlan's translation. Okay, I think he is been a good foundation in Chinese education and also get a PhD degree in Columbia University on philosophy. So he got a good understanding on the Western. So I like his translation. Even. When Amang and I talking about translate Zhuangzi, I'm thinking about using his translation as a foundation and then to change some of part I kind of disagree or I think I can do better job on that. So that's the way I'm thinking. But of course, that's not the only way, and I cannot translate as I translate Dao De Jing or Confucius Analect of Art of War because it's much longer, and then I cannot try to do word match because they will confuse people and they will lost the big picture. I probably will do phrase and or sentence by sentence. That probably the way I would do. So yeah.
Quick question. You have to leave by in about 6 minutes, right? So how is the style of Lao Tzu different than
Very different. Okay, so Laozi, you can say that even we hear in Confucius Analect and Laozi, right? Confucius, there's a student ask question and the Confucius answer. So you have a sort of background. Laozi, Dao De Jing is totally absurd, okay, in all the text because there's only a few chapters have the word I, okay, but we don't know who means I. But usually just talk about the truth, right? The Tao of Heaven is like drawing a ball. He doesn't say who said, well, there's no background. Kind of, I just tell the truth. Zhuangzi is different. That's why I say it's kind of like reading Nietzsche. Okay, so you talk about Ubermensch, then there's story after story, and then it's like to have somebody ask A X B some question, B start to answer, and the answer also have another story, and the story have another story on that. So sometimes it becomes difficult to understand the big picture, but you can just enjoy a small story. For example, famous butterfly dream. Okay, so there's many story you can read. Just
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. So folks,